Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Read Tech webinar, Where Are We Now? Health Canada XML PM Mandate Update. My name is Erin McDermott, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. And I have on the line with me Gary Seener, who is our Senior Manager of Information Solutions here at Read Tech, also a structured product labeling industry expert. I also just wanted to point out a few educational resources if you have any questions about anything that we did not cover today. You can check out our blog and our Knowledge Center on our website, readtech.com, and you're going to want to navigate to the Drug and Biologics Product Submission section or the Drug Label Research section to get to our pharma content. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter to get up-to-date event and industry news updates. As far as what we will be covering today, we are going to take a look at all things Health Canada XML product monograph related. We are going to first jump into an overview, then look at the implementation timeline, a quick comparison of how the XML product monograph is similar to and differs from the FDA SPL requirements. We are going to look at preparation and submission requirements and options for XML PM as well. And then Gary will answer any and all of your questions that we have time to get to. And anything that we cannot cover today, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. Okay, so rolling right along, we were hoping to jump into our first poll question to kick things off. So we're just trying to get kind of a pulse of the audience right now. If you could take a second and answer, how many Health Canada product monographs does your company have? For the selections you'll see on your screen, we're looking at 0, 1 to 5, 6 to 20, 21 to 50, and more than 51 Health Canada product monographs. So we will leave this question open for about another 20 seconds or so. We appreciate everyone taking the time to kind of give us an idea of, how experienced you guys are and what type of audience we're looking at as we provide this content today. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and quickly share the results. It looks like the majority of attendees have 1 to 5 product monographs. And then beyond there, we really differ, with the options from 0 to 51% to 51 labels actually being equal at 11%. Okay. So I think with that, thank you all for your participation in the poll. But now we'll jump right into our content today. So Gary, do you think you can give us an overview of the Health Canada XML product monograph?
Yeah, absolutely, Erin, and thanks for the invite. This is going to be an exciting time. I don't know how you were able to time this particular webinar on the XML product monograph, but I don't know if you have inside information or what, but your timing was impeccable. It was absolutely right on. Just a week ago, we had this release from Health Canada with their draft guidance for preparing XML product monographs, and we're reading through it. I don't know, 75 pages or whatever, but there's a lot of questions that went out to industry along with some samples, and we'll be talking more about that. But I just want to say, Erin, great job scheduling this particular event. I know you had it on the calendar long before they released it. So for whatever means that you were able to learn of it, it worked out very well.
Well, I think they heard that you were speaking, Gary, and they thought they would have to catch up and release the draft guidance. Yeah.
Material for us. All right. Well, listen, I know some of you in the audience have attended a webinar that we did a number of months ago. I think it was almost a year ago on Health Canada. And things have changed since then, obviously. And those that have not been exposed to Health Canada, if you don't mind, I'm going to take just a couple slides here and set the background so that we all know what some of the details are about what we talk about, some of the terms that we use and so on. So let's get real started from the basics, start from the ground zero. those that are involved, and it looks like many of them in the audience have product monographs. So you know that this is, I guess the official documentation for your particular product that is approved and distributed with the product and provides information about it. And it has those three parts: the health professional section, the scientific information section, and then a third section really targeted for the patients. And over the course of time, certainly that has been worked well with providing information to patients and professionals that administer the drug products. But over the course of time, Health Canada had looked at some of the other initiatives that are taking place. FDA obviously had moved forward with their structured product labeling activity and moved this content out of PDF into XML. There's some activities going on in Europe at the European Medicine Association, or the European Medicines Agency. And I think what Health Canada was starting to do is like, okay, I think we want to do that. They looked at all the benefits of moving over to XML. It has that information captured in various tags. It can be processed very well and accurately. It does have a human element to it as well as a machine evaluation, so that machine processing is there, and it can extract and parse data out very quickly. Great for sorting and doing data mining and so on. So to improve the accessibility and quality and facilitate machine use and moving over to some international standards, Health Canada put in this place this project to migrate the product monographs from the PDF format over to XML. Some of those in the audience have not been connected to the FDA's activity with XML for labeling. So this might have been a little bit of a new term for you. XML's simply this acronym for a extensible markup language. There are some guidelines from the Worldwide Web Consortium about how that is put together. It's used in many different industries. XML is probably encountered with anything you do with websites or other documentation and so on. But XML does allow for the presentation and capturing of information in various elements such as headings and paragraphs, so you can have obviously text in place. You can build tables, lists, and so on. So there are a lot of different elements that you would normally work inside a word processing like Microsoft Word piece of software. You can also capture and present in XML. Now, one thing that is different about the XML format that you don't have in Microsoft Word is two different views. So the actual machine readable version and the human readable version is separated. There's some different tools for those particular views. You might hear the term raw text or rendered, which would be for the machine and human respectively. But the raw text, many times when this is being authored, there's a dedicated XML editor. There's various types of machine readers and parsers that check things and pull it apart. And that particular information is using the very the background tagged elements with the information in that particular text file. But for humans, and especially certainly for readers, you want to present this and have it look like a regular old Microsoft Word document, for example. So you're able to use a very simple browser to display that information. So Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and so on. And even if you happen to have an XML editor, there's many times a preview option to actually view the information and render it. So that'd be the presentation style. So that's kind of interesting, meaning that you can capture information, put it into raw text, and then based on particular style sheets, you can render it many different ways. So you can target what information is extracted, how it's presented. So the nice thing about that is you write it once, but you can present it in many different types of presentations, all using the very same raw source information. So with that said, what is SPL? So structured product labeling is this standard that Health Level 7 has authored and owns. It is based on XML, so it's just a special type of implementation of XML that's targeted for medical products. And FDA has adopted it many years ago, and now Health Canada has adopted it as the mechanism to put this labeling content in. Health Canada actually has a lot of different applications. Health Canada is just starting with this first product monograph application. So if we look at the foundation with the rules of the road, referred to as a schema, which provides some information about the actual document and what fields can be used, and many times it indicates what values can be selected, you know, how things are able to be connected together. There's hierarchy rules and so on. But that schema is what Health Level 7 provides. And it's the very same schema that FDA uses and Health Canada uses. And that's put together by that standards developing organization, Health Level 7. So FDA and Health Canada layer on top of that some business rules, these implementation guides, controlled vocabulary, and style sheet. So with this recent release of the draft guidance from Health Canada, that addresses this very first bullet, the implementation guide. And it's really a necessary, critical piece of information about how you take information from your label and put it into the various rules of the schema in the XML. You know, how do you tag it? How do you capture that information? Health Canada already has in place a controlled vocabulary. They've been making updates and so on. And they do have a something called a style sheet that shows how to render this. So we'll get into some of those details a little bit. But this first bullet, having this finalized, is a major milestone. So with this draft coming out and hopefully a final version to be released shortly thereafter, very critical step. So with those particular bits of information, the guide, the vocabularies, and the style sheet, Health Canada is able to, you know, define a product monograph. Now, if we start off with the FDA, they first implemented, or not first, but now have a suite, I should say, of various SPLs for labeling. So there's an NDC labor code request that you can build with this SPL. The FDA also uses this establishment registration function, and they also use SPL for labeling and listing functions. And now we add to this suite Health Canada's set of information, their guides, all using the same standard, but now you can capture the information of, that is in a product monograph into this SPL file, you know, based on XML. So let's move on a little bit into what is the scope of this project. So it's very narrow scope. Health Canada is focusing in just the human prescription drugs and just those products that are making use of the 2020 template for the product monograph. So we'll talk a little bit more about templates, but we should also identify what is not in scope. So any of these products that would fall into the over-the-counter activity, your medical devices, food or veterinary drugs, self-care products, and so on, they are not in scope as of yet. So there might be some expansion in the future, but as of right now, only human prescription drugs and not any of those older templates other than 2020. So when we talk about templates, for those that have been preparing product monographs, you have used templates, and this is just some of the highlights. There's been multiple versions, 2004, 2014, 2016, major revisions, and those templates have, many different variations. So the 2016, you had like 6 different variations of that template depending on your particular drug product. When Health Canada elected to capture this information in XML, they originally thought, well, we'll accommodate all of these templates, and it got to be, I believe, we'll use the word nightmare, but it was just extremely tough to accommodate all those. So this kind of triggered, and there was other reasons in place, obviously, but the Health Canada put in place a 2020 master product monograph template, and that's been used, trying to remember the time frame, a year and a half or so now. So if you've even been submitting PDF format, you'll be using this 2020 master template. But it's very significant because that was able to facilitate the use of a standardized template, and then they could write instructions, say, this is how you take that content and put it into XML product monograph. So that was, a little bit of a history about what the templates are, and you probably have, if you've been submitting anything recently, you've been using this 2020 template, so it's no big change. You might have some legacy products that have not had changes going way back to earlier versions. But keep in mind, as you have a change, and certainly when you migrate over to an XML product monograph format of that product monograph, you'll definitely need to migrate the content into 2020. It's relatively easy to migrate to 2016. There's additional content changes if you have an older version, and so just be aware of that. So, Aaron, I know I went around full circle, covered a lot of different topics there, but I think maybe that's the quick overview of the XML product monograph project at Health Canada.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. That was a great recap. Definitely a good foundation for everyone who had some questions. But I'm sure that the burning question in everyone's mind right now is when does this need to be done? So I know there's been a lot of uncertainty and back and forth on that, but maybe you could kind of give us an overview of where we stand with the implementation timeline today.
Sure. Let's do a quick recap. Going way back to 2017, 2019, there were some early pilots. Actually, we participated, with others in this Health Canada pilot, and was able to, be involved, provide feedback, and so on, and created documents for this early phase, what they call phase 1 and phase 2. We'll see that laid out in a second here. And over the course of time, I have to give some credit to some of the project managers, Craig Anderson, one of the early project managers, now Tracy Brown and Brian Drew involved. They're providing great information, keeping everyone up to speed over the course of time. There's a couple notes there about, these emails that come out periodically providing industry with information in advance notice. So that we actually learned through one of these, dated August 18th, just recently, about this draft guidance being released, along with some samples. So this communication is actually very good. It's been ongoing for a number of years. I'm not going to get into every one of these particular documents and events. There's been various notices published. There's been some delays. There's an announcement about start of phase 1 and start of phase 2, and so on. You can go back and check some of this history out if you have an interest. But let's get to the actual timeline. So there are 3 phases that have been identified and a possible 4th one. So if we look way back in 2020 of June 1 of 2020, you see phase 1 actually did start, and that was a very limited scope. You really, actually, there was a request to, you know, the way this worked, you would put a request into Health Canada to participate, and so it was kind of a narrow gateway about who was let in. I think pretty much anyone that had interest were let in, but it was not open to the public. You had to make a special request and limited production test activities. And that lasted a year. After that year, the Health Canada opened up the doors to all of industry. So if you want to voluntarily submit a product monograph in XML, you were able to do that. So it's been a number of years. We're sitting here in the 2023 mid-year type time frame. So it's been about 2 years that phase 2 has been open for voluntary submissions. Now, we just had this draft guidance come out in a couple of weeks ago, August, and there is a firm date for the comments to period to be closed in November. So we know those particular dates on this timeline. Those are firmed and published and well established. So now the big question is, well, when does phase 3 start? Phase 3 changes the landscape, and now we enter into a mandatory production submission for any new or changed product monograph. And XML would be required for those type of submissions. And I'm a optimist, so I put a deadline here and then with the red in 2024, but that's not firm, that's not official date. So this is to be decided. And how do you arrive at that date? Well, there's a couple milestones that have to occur. So after the comment period closes in November, if you're an optimist, you would hope that maybe balance in November and December, Health Canada reviews all those comments and releases the the final guidance document, and they put like maybe a 6-month enforcement date to occur, sometime in mid-2024, and that, that's how you would get to the mid-2024 with the beginning of phase 3. I will also mention that that's very, very optimistic. And if I were placing money, I wouldn't put too much money on that particular date. I'd put a little bit more money on something maybe in mid-2025. And the reason for that is to give Health Canada a few more months, maybe actually 6 months or so, to actually do all the final changes and go through the red tape to get the documents released and published, and then allowing a year for industry to react, 1 year later. So the enforcement of that particular event might be a year later. So, and again, there's no hard evidence, to support these arguments, and who knows, it might be 2 years or whatever that industry has to react. So I think perhaps a better guess is mid-2025, but at the very earliest, I don't see this happening before the middle of 2024. So those are the best guesses. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about on this timeline is all the way on the right, this phase 4. So what in the world is that all about? Phase 4 would be applicable to those particular monographs that are for very probably mature products, what I would call legacy product monographs, and they have just seen no changes over many, many years. It's a well-established, mature product. Product monograph doesn't change, and so there could be, some of these legacy product monographs that have not been required to be submitted in XML. And the question point, is there going to be a tipping point that eventually Health Canada says, you know what, like 85% of the market has been converted to product monograph. We love the benefits. Are we going to now require the balance of the industry to move over to product monographs. And we'll see when, first of all, if that happens, and secondly, when that happens. That is definitely down the road. I put roughly, 2.5 years of phase 3 before that would even be considered. And again, there's no evidence to support that particular timing from the Health Canada at this point. So they have not committed to that. But early on, they talked about this might perhaps eventually happen. So that is the quick timeline. Mid-2024 at the very earliest, most likely mid-2025 is my better guess, Aaron. So we'll leave it at that.
I'm going to be optimistic and agree with the mid-2024. Who knows? Maybe they'll throw a January 2024 deadline at us. We got to be ready.
Right. Okay.
So it does seem like we're at least finally taking steps to nearing that phase 3, though. So in preparation for that, I think that kind of takes us right into our next topic, which is can you kind of show us how this compares to US FDA SPL, which I think is going to determine a lot of how prepared some of our customers are, how much experience they've had with the US FDA. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, please, Gary?
Yeah, sure. Now, there's, I don't know the percentage, but certainly there's two groups in this audience, Aaron. The first group are those that have experience with the FDA and SPL, and that is going to be extremely beneficial in your implementation of Health Canada. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. So a blessing is that you are familiar with this type of data and the capturing and XML and so on. Well, the curse is that Health Canada did not do a cookie cutter. It's just not the same. So, like Aaron, if you had been working with US SPLs, you think, oh, I'll just go and just put my Canadian product into this particular package. There's many things that are different, as we'll see when we do this comparison. So you have to remember to abide by the new rules. The money is different in Canada. Yeah, you have coins and you have dollar bills like U.S., but different denominations. So when you get into the very details, it's going to be different. Now, the other segment, and Aaron, I don't know if you've actually are able to figure that out from where people log in from and their email or whatever, but the other portion of the audience do not have a connection with the US FDL. So this is all new and kind of different. So those people that have this long history, think of your learning curve in trying to understand the US SPL. And it might have been, who knows, many years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But it was a real challenge to become fluent and up to speed. So we're trying to help that. And for those that do have the FDA comparison, this will probably be good to help you figure out what to do for your Health Canada XML product monographs. So first of all, let's look at the scope. There's a couple pages here, just a heads up of this comparison. And for the FDA, they started off with human prescription drugs, but now have expanded, oh my goodness, it's like 61 different document types. And that covers, human, biologics, veterinary drugs, and all types of established registrations and so on. But that has actually evolved over the course of time. They didn't do all 61 on day one. They started off with human prescription. So that's where Health Canada is at. They're starting off with human prescription. No over-the-counter at this point, just a single product monograph instance. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that that might expand going forward. So if you open up a SPL for the FDA, you'll see 17 sections, all deterministic based on the product labeling or the physician's labeling rule, PLR. And so you can go to 11, get indications. You know exactly where to go. And then at the end, or this patient information and med guides as necessary. a lot of the information that you read from a professional point of view and information that you get is available certainly in the Health Canada product monograph, but the organization is different. We talked about those three sections in the beginning. There's three different parts that you have. It's structured differently. Once you finally get past the initial headings, a lot of the content starts to look the same. Now, if we look at the template for the U.S., there is something called an SPL original that was used for many use prior to the SPO physician's labeling rule, but new documentation that comes out would point you to certainly the physician labeling rule. There are some legacy products out there that are still using SPL original, and we talked about this 2020 template for Health Canada. Now, the other major difference is language. So if you've been working in Canada, obviously that you have the two official languages, English and French. So there are two submissions. Certainly the FDA, you didn't have that, it just had the English. Identification of your product is different. So you have a national drug code versus a drug information identification number in Canada. So with that, let's move on to the second page. And this is interesting. We start off with the schema, very same schema from Health Level 7. We talked about that. And then it starts to differ. So this is where you need to read the details and the draft guidance that came out, and hopefully eventually this final guidance will specify how you actually code this information. Health Canada used the FDA as a reference, but they did not copy it. They really authored this all on their own, and the rules are quite different in many cases. So you'll see the vocabulary. They share a couple international sets of information with the FDA, but they do have their own in many cases, and the style sheet is quite different. So we'll take a look at that of the actual presentation. The other major difference is on these three items at the bottom of the chart: authoring and validation. The FDA provided two free tools, an FDA X Forms and a CEDAR Direct. So these are two web-based tools that you can author information and go to the site and use them. Certainly there's industry tools out there. You can use an in-house product, you buy it and install it, or you can build it yourself. There's vendors involved. We here at RETAC would be in this vendor category where we offer services and products to build this for the SPL or for the FDA. Now, when you go to Canada, they started to think about an authoring tool, but quickly dismissed that idea. So they, as a health authority, do not offer an authoring tool. So you do have to look to this, industry side only as that means to create SPL. So, however you do that with an in-house tool, you buy a tool or you rent a tool, use a service, whatever. You cannot make use of a free, piece of technology from Health Canada. And the same discussion is true for validation. So the FDA does provide something called a Pragmatic Data Validator Lite tool where you can upload an SPL and have it check for any errors. Or you can, have an in-house tool to actually do that check as well. Health Canada is, again, no validation tools made available to the public. You can go to this industry side to get information there. Now, they do in Health Canada provide internal validation, so they check content when it comes in, but that's for internal review once it's part of the ECTD submission. XML product monograph is actually checked. So moving on, packaging, excuse me, packaging, you're able to submit an SPL directly for the U.S. The FDA. In some particular labeling, It's actually submitted as part of the ECTD. Health Canada, it's always part of an ECTD. Images, only the principal display panels used in Canada. The actual very same electronic submission gateway is used, but you redirect it to the Health Canada Center. And there's a multiple-step process, so review, get updates, there's a second language involved. So some of these things are similar, but just a little bit different. What were the challenges? So just a couple things about the challenges. Health Canada had to switch over to some project managers, and middle of all that was the COVID-19. And it takes a lot of dedication and expertise to build those guides and vocabularies and style sheets, and I think that is actually what has taken the longest period of time. From the manufacturer's point of view, for those in the audience, the challenges will be, reauthoring some of those older product monographs. This is brand new technology, especially if you don't have the SPL connection with the FDA. And there's been relatively light participation in some of the pilots, so it's going to be a real challenge moving forward. So Erin, I think that moves us over to the next section.
Yes. Well, thank you for going through that, Gary. I think that was a very important section before we move into the preparation and submission, because it seems, based on your explanation, like we are definitely comparing apples and oranges when it comes to Health Canada and the US FDA. So I think understanding that is going to help us figure out what we need to do in terms of preparation and submission, but hopefully you can kind of take us even more in depth in that area.
Yeah, let's dive into that. I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is this draft guidance that came out. I would highly encourage those in the audience to go to the link. You are able to request the draft document and the sample product monographs. They're not published, available for download, but you can put a request in by email to this link down there on the slide, and they would send out those documents for you to review. And right up front, the more comments the better. They want to make sure that what they have in place suits all the end users, and more comments the better. So it makes sure that they have targeted all the particular questions and take care of that. So I encourage those in the audience to participate in this review. We actually have review going on, detailed review as well. Anyway, that's the quick point. Go ahead when you start preparing, get these particular documents and review them and send them back. Now, in your infrastructure, you have been preparing product monographs over the course of time, and you have these particular functions in place. You source, you know how to author a product monograph. It's a team, and you actually have had requirements for translations as well. But this particular step, the XML product monograph build, is brand new, and submitting this as part of an ECTD tool. You already, many of you have certainly have the ECTD tool submission capabilities. But this is new, this task, and I just wanted to highlight, what we refer to. There's no Health Canada provided online authoring tool or a validator. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge when you start creating this document. And what are the particular things that you need to collect? So let's take a look at some of the metadata. Now, this is not a section in the current product monograph. This is a section that is in addition to the regular narrative that you would put together, and it's a way of capturing a number of metadata values with many times it has a code connected to them. And this actually supports a lot of the machine searching and capabilities and extracting information. So there's a number of elements there, roughly 70, that you'll need to come up with: inactive ingredients, active ingredients, the strength, the dosage form, information about the market holder, and so on. But that needs to be collected. That'll be brand new for those that are moving to XML product monograph for the first time. Another item that you'll need to create, and Aaron, I know you as the marketing person, a lot of times cringe when all you see are these angle brackets up on the screen. It's like, no one's going to understand that.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, well, this is my one slide.
Yeah.
But
I think you snuck this in later.
Yeah, at the last minute. So, it warms my heart to see all these angle brackets, but this is certainly not the view that you want to have when you author. There's other tools and means to have this done, but just to let you know, this is that raw text that we were talking about, and more importantly, this is the rendered view. So this is a great style sheet. I think Health Canada did a wonderful job of putting the style sheet together. They have a table of contents on the left-hand side. You can expand and collapse the different topics, which is very nice. And then you can jump to a particular section. So this narrative section is presented on the right-hand side. You can flow through that rather easily. And you remember all those metadata values that we were collecting and putting into those, angle brackets and storage and so on? The style sheet takes that information and builds some very nice tables. So these are very similar, if you're familiar with the metadata that the SPL style sheet has with the FDA. You'll see a lot of similarities. But this really does present that information in a much more organized way. Health Canada calls it product details. And it's just, all those bits of metadata about the product. Now, going back to this flow, the actual submission, once you have these products created and put them in an ECTD package, you can set them off through the electronic submission gateway. And the Health Products and Food and Branch, HPFB, reviews them, approves them, and publishes them. Now, there's in the appendix of the downloaded presentation, you'll see a lot more details because this has some repetitive activity. So you iterate with English and French, and you do have this this build step along the way that you're going to have to put some kind of a solution in place for that. We here at ReTech offer a way for you to accomplish that task. Remember, there's no Health Canada offering, but you can make use of the ReTech service to build those XML product monographs. So some of the areas of expertise that we have from the FDA in building those over the many years, and a lot of expertise with XML, and also participating in a number of XML product monographs for Health Canada. So there's this concept of data validation, making sure that it meets the controlled vocabularies and the schema to make sure that it's built correctly. And so we perform those particular functions. There's version control and storage of all those particular activities, and this happens in a compliant environment, so on. So you have some reporting and so on. But the process is a handoff. So you give us the raw material, and ReTech it delivers back the XML product monograph versions, and there might be a final, or excuse me, an initial. There might be a final, and perhaps some iterative steps along the way if necessary, and then also first language, second language. So you go back and do this. So if English happens to be the first language that you pick to follow this process, there is a requirement to supply the French language as well. So this is an option for you to resolve that gap. How do you build the XML? In this case, now you review that XML. The build takes place inside the ReTech operations here. I do have a couple additional slides from a recent event. The Canadian Association of Professionals in Regulatory Affairs had a conference recently, and Tracy Brown, the project manager at Health Canada, provided a couple slides. So these are her slides, so the content's coming from Health Canada. And this reports the number of stats. So this is up and running even in phase 2. So these are official production submissions, low volume to get it started, but I just wanted to present the fact that, there is activity going on. This is not zero, where they've never processed anything. So there have been a lot of good activities, a number of companies involved in some of the early adoption and just kind of putting their foot in the water, just testing the temperature and seeing how this might work out. So there's not a huge amount of products here, but definitely some products. And we were, just a few months into 2023, so this count was only at 7. So I expect that to go up at the end of the year. But there is some information there that, or the counts are already there. Now, from these particular submissions and some of the samples that were sent, Tracy did collect a list of common errors, things that pop up repeatedly. So these would be things that you want to be aware of and make sure that you do a good job in addressing these particular areas. We won't go into all the details, but they're related to control vocabulary. And remember, this is a set of vocabulary items that you pick from, and they're the Health Canada version. So it's not, exact copy. If you've done a similar type of thing for the FDA, it's not going to be the same code. You'll have to make use of the Health Canada codes, and there's actually French and English versions of these codes that you'll need to select and pick those. And when you do pick a particular code, there's a text entry, like a term entry, as well as a code. So in some cases, they didn't match the exact legitimate value. So don't use old codes and make sure that you have the current versions. This has seen a number of revisions over the course of time. So if you had done some early samples, don't rely on the codes that you selected back then. That's really does need to be based on current code list. Quick comment there about temporary values. Don't put fake values in image files. Sometimes there's references that are incorrect there, and the cross references, external and internal links are not correct. Or can't find that particular area, and the various date formats. So the style sheet will figure out the date. You don't need to render it in or enter it in a particular way that you think it ought to be rendered. Just put it in the official schema format, and then let the style sheet take care of that. All right, so this is the third slide from Tracy about where we are today and where we will be probably when phase 3 gets started. There's some subtle differences. So if you're about to make a production submission, be aware that things are going to be different going forward. And let's just take a look at a couple of these. So the required, what do you actually have to submit? So this is voluntary use of XML product monograph. In the future, it will be required. And submission of a Word version of that product monograph is still going to be required. So that does not go away. It's very much like the FDA, where you submit both an XML file and a Word file. So this will occur for both English and French. Word is still used for evaluation, convenience, and perhaps negotiation. The validation. Right now, if you have an error in your XML product monograph, it will not trigger a rejection of your ECTD submission. That's not going to be the case going forward. So XML product monograph does have to have a pass connected to it for you to have an ECT pass. And if it does have an error and you get a failure, it's going to cause the whole ECTD to be failed. Not the case today, but going forward. We talked about this Microsoft Word, and now the emphasis changes to the XML product graph. So the actual review would be looking at the content of the XML product monograph, where today it's really there just for reference purposes, and then they review the Word document. And then the notice of compliance, the timing for that, the XML product monograph is authorized at the time of notice of the compliance, and the Word is really there for convenience. It's not the official copy. So, Aaron, I think maybe I believe you had mentioned something about another poll question. I think that's the quick review that we have about preparation and submission. Let's take that poll question and then see if we have any live questions at the end here.
Sure. While I'm pulling this poll question up, Gary, it was great to see that we're at least seeing some companies starting to submit to Health Canada, because one thing that's of note to me is we don't know how long of a period of time we're going to have between when we find out the due date and when it actually arrives. Will it be several months? Will it be very short? So it's nice to see some companies at least getting their feet wet. Yep,
definitely. Yeah, and we support those companies as well. So if you'd like to do either a voluntary submission, and it's still possible to submit an unofficial copy and just have the Health Canada review that for you, provide some feedback, but not official. But on the other hand, if you do want to make it official, that's still available too. So either way, if you would like to, and be glad to support you on that particular types of submissions.
Absolutely. So we'll jump into our second poll question. How do you plan to create Health Canada XML product monograph? ReadTech, a different third-party service provider, existing SPL tool, a new SPL tool that you will have to buy or build, or you have not yet determined how you're going to handle these. All right, we'll leave this open for about another 10 seconds or so. And as Gary mentioned, please feel free to reach out to us if you do need some guidance in this area. We're happy to have a conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And Gary, it looks like we have about 48% using ReadTech. That's great to see. 6% using a different third-party service provider, and about 45% who are still undetermined. Yeah, so with that, Gary, I will pass it back to you.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I'm not too surprised that people sitting in a ReadTech webinar are going to be using ReadTech, but hopefully we provide a lot of information.
But we still love to
see it. Yeah. Well, that's really great, and I don't know that all of those have actually engaged ReadTech or decided to build a sample, but hopefully that is in your near future. Maybe the second half of this year or early next year, you start to get the wheels turning on that. Aaron, I think we have like a couple minutes left here. I think I'll check with you to see if any live questions might have come in from the audience, or do you have anything that we want to bring up from the audience?
We do have a few. We do have only about 5 minutes left, so we're only going to select a few, but as noted, we'll follow up with anyone else. Or if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to email us. The first question we got, Gary, is, and you kind of may have covered this since this question came in, but is there a benefit to submitting the XML product monograph before the mandatory submission due date? And if you do that, is it considered an official submission?
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to go back to that slide that showed some stats. And why in the world would you, submit early, if it's not yet required and not, on the schedule? So there are some reasons to do that. So when we talk to these particular clients, that have participated. One of the benefits is that they know this is going to happen, and they elect to be what I would refer to as like an early adopter, but they want to explore the means to do that. So, if this is a department, say in Canada, that's responsible for this activity, they don't have the luxury of the the knowledge that like a U.S. equivalent department might have. So many times they're just learning this process. It's going to be brand new, and there's a pretty steep learning curve on the front end to understand the terms. What's going to be different, how you actually build this particular activity. So starting early and laying some groundwork is, I think, one of the benefits that you can explore. You can do training. You can do some of the early, creation, and exercise some of these SOPs. Where you have your standard operating procedures that need to be adjusted. You might need to determine a particular tool or vendor. How are you actually going to create this? So having those things done early, it's going to happen sooner or later, but starting that allows you to have the freedom to make good decisions and take the time to make a good high quality decision and consider all the stakeholders. Rather than at the last minute, trying to do all this in a fire drill. Sometimes you're a little bit more prone to make mistakes, if it's under a rush. So doing it early, you have the benefit of laying the foundation, doing the training, and exercising. Now, I would fully understand that you may not want to submit all of your portfolio, but having maybe one or two samples exercised, it certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Now, these early submissions can be submitted as an official submission. So one thing to consider, though, is once you switch over to XML product monograph, obviously Health Canada would want you to stay there and not switch back to a PDF. So if you do switch, realize that that product A is now in XML product monograph format, and ongoing changes, supplements, and so on would need to stay in that particular case. So that's the quick answer there, Erin, about submitting and getting a lot of benefits. Figure it out, lay the groundwork, get all your tools and systems in place.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that, Gary. It looks like we are about out of time, but we did get one question several times from several folks. So I will try to sneak this one in under the wire. Do they need to have an XML editor tool to support their product monograph submission?
Yeah, that's a real important question. So it depends. The answer depends on how you actually build this tool. So if you are making use of an external vendor, then the short answer is no. You don't need an XML editor for that. All that particular work and creation and checking and validation against the schema, would be done by this particular entity. In this case, Retech. We do all that, and you only need a simple browser. So Google Chrome, Microsoft tools, browsers, and so on. That's all you need, so that you can review it. You definitely want to be able to review it. Now, the other side of that, if you elect to do this in-house, you want to make sure that the tool that you use has those editing capabilities. Many times the XML will be built in the background, so you're not working with all those angle tabs. I don't at all recommend a text editor. So Notepad or something like that, where you you actually build this from scratch. That can be a very rigorous task. I don't recommend that. So make sure whatever tool that you look at is built for the Health Canada XML product monograph specifically. You can't use one that's built for just the US FDA. It has to have XML capability. As we discussed, it is different, quite a different editor. So yeah, that's the short answer. If you use Retech or an outsource particular model, you do not need to have an editor tool.
Great. All right. Well, thank you to everyone for attending this webinar, for your participation and your questions. As I noted, if we did not get to your question live right now, we'll certainly follow up with you individually. Gary, thank you so much for presenting today. We really appreciate having you with us. And if anyone has any questions, you know, or would like some additional information about our Health Canada services, you can reach us at pharma@readtech.com or the phone number shown on your screen. Also, do make sure you're following us on social media and you're signed up for our newsletter. There's a link right on the homepage of our website if you're not, so that you continue to get any updates about Health Canada as well as, you know, other areas of interest. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we will hopefully see you next time.